President Cyril Ramaphosa has accepted the resignation of 4 SABC board members. The resignations follow a disagreement with the new Communications Minister, Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams, over staff retrenchments. The board had taken a decision to institute Section 189 of the Labour Relations Act, retrenching nearly 1,000 permanent employees and 1,200 freelancers, it said, as part of a turnaround strategy.
Parliament questioned the retrenchment, saying the SABC was accountable to it. But the board was adamant that this was the only way to go to save the SABC. This led to a showdown between the minister and the board. Then the minister wrote a scathing letter to the board in which she highlighted intentions to stop further engagements with the board if it remained adamant on retrenchments. The minister wanted retrenchments put on hold. Whilst there has been a dark cloud over whether the president will approve the resignation or not, it would appear that the curtain has already fallen.
We can confirm that the President has received 4 letters of resignation from members of the SABC board, being Krish Naidoo, Ms. Khanyisile Kweyama, John Mattison, as well as Mr. Mathatha Tsdeu. So the President has accepted these resignations and will be writing to the Speaker as the appointing authority to inform Parliament of these resignations. It's expected then that Parliament will refer this matter to the relevant portfolio committee to look at how those particular vacancies are filled.
Board member Krish Naidoo was reported to have said in his resignation that accountability and interference had led to a breakdown in their negotiations with the minister. But what does this mean for the SABC?
The relevant ministers and the relevant ministries need to sit around and find a way to recapitalize the public broadcaster. It is a public broadcaster. So we can't think that the money is going to come from private investors or somebody else. It's too late to be talking about those kind of deals. It needs recapitalization now. The political nuances of it all can be discussed at a later stage. Right now we need to keep people in their jobs, the lights on and the broadcasts going.
Okay, are you concerned that the minister hasn't said anything as yet?
A little bit concerned, but moreover concerned about, the president accepting the resignations and the fact that we could literally be sitting without a leadership structure at the top.
It now remains to be seen what's going to happen next. Will the president waive the 3-month notice period, or has he accepted resignations with immediate effect? Lehana Tsoteti, SABC News, Johannesburg.
All right, so the board crisis going from bad to worse today. We reached out to the SIU, by the way. They are investigating various members of the previous interim board, some of those who've resigned. We tried to reach out to the board of the SABC, 2 individual board members, the Communications Ministry and Parliament as well. They've all declined to speak further other than the statements released today or yesterday. So what does this mean for the financial crisis at the SABC? Remember, it previously said that it was heading towards day 0 by March next year, where it would not be in a position to pay salaries if there's no financial bailout from government. To discuss, we're joined via Skype by Kyle Cowan, investigative journalist at News 24, and in studio, Wayne Duvenage from the organisation Undoing Tax Abuse Outer. Welcome to you, and let me start with you, Kyle. I think you've put this lightly. You've said it's caused some confusion about where this all leaves the public broadcaster.
Yes, I think that was a bit of an understatement. I think what we really should be saying is that it's chaos. At the moment, it seems as if the remaining members of the board are under siege. We do have cognizance of, the political nuances, which do seem to point to the fact that, the board is being collapsed in front of our very eyes. And the motivation for that, I think we really need to delve into and try and uncover exactly why now, this time of year, so soon before elections, and also why the ministers don't seem to be willing to come on board to solve the financial crisis.
Well, let's be explicit, Carl. You've said that what has happened, the fact that they've been given immediate resignations, the whole 3-month is being waived, you say that lends credence to claims by the DA that the ANC is interfering.
Yes, and I've spoken to sources of mine on the SABC board who have spoken to me at length about, sort of political interference by the ANC, and it seems to me that there's a sort of a campaign to try and put pressure on individual members of the board to get them to resign, so that we come to the situation where we are now, where the board is inquorate. It has a 90-day sort of grace period where they can still make decisions, but then really those decisions, the legality of those decisions starts to be questioned. So what I'm uncovering slowly but surely, and I've tried to address this with the ANC spokesperson, Mr. Pule Mabe, but he's been very difficult to reach over the last couple of days, it would appear. And also, a strong indication of this is the lack of communication, I think, from the new minister. I think we really need to focus on that and find out exactly why. Just 2 days after meeting the board for the very first time, she claims the board is not giving her enough time to study the literature, study their efforts in cost cutting. But at the same time, within 2 days, she's willing to say, I'm cutting all ties with this board because they are just blatantly refusing to do anything. They're just doing their own thing. They don't have the interests of the SABC at heart. But the question really now is does the minister have the interests of the SABC at heart? You don't know the board, you have not built a relationship with them, but yet you are ready to say, I can't work with these people.
All right, just to let our viewers know, we will be speaking to the ANC's Pule Mabe in a little bit later in the show, and the ANC has rejected, it says, with contempt, these claims of political interfering. Wayne Duvenage from ATA, what do you think?
Well, we've seen this movie before. This is clearly political meddling and interference. This board has got a job to do. It's got to turn this institution around. There are two elements to it. There's the professional and competitive side of broadcasting to get advertiser revenue in. But with SABC, there's a role that it has to play on education and the communications to so many of citizens out there. And while we don't want to continuously see these bailouts, these funds are required. But what is also required is that the minister needs to leave this board alone. They've been put in place to do a job, and they need to do that job. And if that means taking tough decisions like retrenchments and that, which we don't want to see, obviously, in a time where jobs are a problem, but if that's what has to happen to start turning this organisation around, then that's what must happen, and the politics must just stay out of this place.
Political interference is a big claim, given the history of SABC. So are you thinking that's in terms of the retrenchments, because it looks bad for people to lose their jobs now at the SABC, or really is this about elections in 2019?
I think it's a combination of both, and we saw this with Eskom. Recently the board had indicated 0 increases, and along come the politicians and say, no, that's not going to be good for us, and with the elections coming up. There's about 15,000 jobs that need to be taken out there. SAA has got problems, and politics interfered. It was the politicians who interfered with even the political, with the operational appointments here at the SABC with Hlaudi Motsoeneng that's got this organisation into the mess it has. The boards have resigned in the past. We've now got over all of that. An interim board is put in, the new board has been appointed, and they're doing their work. And suddenly we start this process all over again. Board members resigning. This is chaos, and the public are getting fed up. And really, the minister now needs to step back and explain herself, because she cannot just divorce herself from the board, as Kyle says. She needs to work with them. She needs to find the impasse and stop just walking away. It really is ludicrous.
Kyle, just stay with the politics, because is it really clear? And the reason I'm asking is because there's so many different reasons for these resignations. So Ms. Kweyama had one reason, Mathatha Tsdeu talking about the bailout, a lack of resources for the board to do its job. John Mattison apparently opposed to the retrenchments. So there's no clear sort of understanding of why this exodus is happening.
No, there isn't, and this is where we have the space where speculation just mushrooms out of nothing. And well, when I say speculation, it's well-informed speculation. Let's classify it as that, because we are aware of meetings that have taken place. We are aware that there are allegations, of political interference, and these are not allegations that are made lightly. This is not something you wake up one morning and decide this is what I'm going to say. So the various reasons provided in the resignation letters, I'm not saying they're untrue. There probably is a level of truth to them. Mr. Naidoo's resignation letter was particularly interesting. He spoke of people on the board not knowing the difference between political interference and oversight. And I think that was our strongest indication yet, that even the board behind closed doors is saying, guys, we think that there is political interference here. We need to stand strong. We need to stand together. We need to make the right decisions. And that to me really was the sort of final nail in the coffin, if you really want to put it that way, that confirmed to me that even the board members are worried about political interference. And if you are sitting on a board of the SABC, would you have an exceptionally important job to do, you cannot have that cloud hanging over you. You need to know that the minister who's in charge of your portfolio will have your back. She will support you. She will come to meetings with an understanding that sometimes quick solutions are not easy to find. And also, she won't make sure that letters are written, within a couple of hours of meeting you, that essentially puts you out in the cold without a rudder going down the river.
And is the president involved then if he's willing to accept these resignations so quickly with no waiting period at all?
Well, I drew this conclusion in an analysis piece I wrote earlier this afternoon, and really the indications are that President Cyril Ramaphosa has accepted that these board members must leave now. And this, to me, just speaks to the fact that the president is possibly not willing right now to step in and really help find a solution. There's a 3-month notice period that these board members have to serve. All 4 have asked for this period to be waived, which places the current board members who have decided to stay on in a very precarious position, because now essentially their colleagues are abandoning them in that sense. And if the president is approving that 3-month, to waive that 3-month period, it really says to me that instead of engaging with these individuals and saying, look, guys, can I convince you just to stay for the 3 months? And then we will find a solution to these issues that you are raising in that time. But it seems to me that everything is coming together. It's sort of a perfect storm, and all the pressure that's been brought to bear on the board over these looming retrenchments has now resulted in certain individuals deciding to throw in the towel.
Wayne, are you worried about the presidency's actions?
Yes, I think Kyle knocks the nail on the head. And somebody like Krish Naidoo, who has exercised moral courage on this same board in the past, stepped away, been invited to come back. When he starts making statements like this, we need to take notice. So it was very, the political meddling comes in the form of the president accepting these resignations far too quickly. Even he should have engaged with them, he should have got to the bottom of it, maybe met with the minister, and maybe a week later or two, but there's something that's not right here.
Even if there's not active meddling, is it right? Because remember, you try and represent taxpayers.
Yes.
Is it right for a communications minister to say, I'm not going to engage with the board after a bad meeting?
It's absolutely wrong. You don't behave that way. You find the impasse, you meet again, and you get around the obstacles. You might not always agree on matters, but you cannot just walk away and stop talking to your board. I mean, that's just ludicrous. Imagine if business was run like this.
Another thing, quickly, Wayne, because you're concerned about, obviously, abuse of taxpayers' money. There were some claims that the SIU is now investigating the interim board. These 4 people who resigned were part of that interim board, being investigated around some security tender. The SABC issued a statement today saying that security tender, the problem was that there was a whistleblower, so they picked the second bidder. Is that a good enough explanation for you around that issue, which is causing extra confusion?
Yeah, look, I mean, we must allow the SIU to get to the bottom of it. We've given them a lot of information as well in the past. There were so many things that were happening. So I'm not sure on the specific issue on this one. But let's see what comes out of those investigations. Let them run their course.
Kyle, those investigations, can we say that is a complete separate matter? The SABC saying they're completely confused why the SIU is looking at that interim board.
You know, I find that very hard to believe, because the SIU started investigating the security tender, which is worth about 185 million rand, based on a board decision. If my understanding is correct, the board, when the new board was appointed, this issue was raised.
Exactly, and they're
it
saying
was
that's
said.
why they don't understand why they are being investigated. They raised the issue.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, at the end of the day, we must remember that the interim board made the decision to award this tender at the end of the day. And as you mentioned, there was issues surrounding the first bidder, and there was allegations of some corruption. So we decided, let's give it to the second bidder. Now, my understanding, and this is what we've been trying to also dig into over the last couple of days, is that there has emerged some reports, some whistleblowers have stepped forward to say, look, we have this information regarding this tender and certain members of the interim board. And what we must remember is that some members of that interim board became members of the new board in October 2017, you know, if we can call it the new board. And 3 of those members have now resigned. So what we are left with is a question to say, but if the SIU has provisionally found that there was financial wrongdoing in the awarding of this tender, is this not maybe also a reason for pressure being brought to bear on these individuals? But at this stage, I do not find that plausible, because the recommendations or the preliminary reports have been shared with President Cyril Ramaphosa. They've been shared with the chairperson of the board, Mr. Bonga Musa Makatini. And as far as I am aware, the individual members of the board have not seen those reports yet.
All right, so what we have is more questions than answers around that SIU investigation, around all the resignations. Thank you very much. That was Kyle Cowan, a News 24 investigative journalist, and Outers Wayne Duvenage.